Here we go. Good evening and welcome to Tuesday, April 2nd, Urban Village Development Commission. I'm Carl Lee, sitting in for Jeff Walker. Hi, Jeff. He's homesick tonight, he says. I saw his motorcycle in his driveway, so, I'm just saying. We have no meeting minutes to review. I understand they're deferred, whatever that means.
Coming soon to a mailbox near you.
To a mailbox near you, but it means we don't have them to approve tonight, so we'll just go ahead and move directly to our first and main order of business tonight, which is the Ichijo Parcel 2 hearing, and I think we turn it over to Peter and Lucy.
Good evening. Tonight I was just going to go over some of the issues that were discussed at the public meeting.
Peter, you're probably going to get blinked very quickly.
That again. This will work better. Try not to get too much feedback. There were a number of issues that were raised at the public meeting that we had, and so tonight I'd just like to go through the issues that were identified and addressed in the briefing memo. The first issue was Tract A, which is the open space recreation tract that's at the far west end of the site.
Hey, Peter, if you hit F5, you'll get the full screen.
Thank you. So the Tract A, the open space tract, is to the on the far west side of the parcel, and this is a little bit of a detail that shows its relationship to the houses that front onto the tract. In the staff report, there was actually a little better graphic in terms of you could see through the green there, but didn't happen on the PowerPoint. But the issues that were discussed at the public briefing, is Tract A in the right location? Does Tract A provide usable open space given the narrow width and slopes? Does the design of Tract A balance the private area of residences fronting the tract with making the public realm accessible and usable to all residents? And how does Tract A interface with adjacent open space? The briefing memo provides information about all of these issues. In terms of the location of an open space tract, there's a lot of considerations in terms of how central it is to the plat and views and proximity to traffic. It's an open space recreation tract that's intended to be usable, so having it adjacent to a road is not always the best location. So there's a number of considerations to balance in terms of the location of the recreation tract, and some of the advantages of the location of Tract A is that it is at the edge, so it's away from the road and away from cars. There's potential for views to the west, and it's adjacent to other open space, so it can give a feeling of being larger than it actually is in terms of borrowing that adjacent open space. So those are some of the considerations in terms of the location. For Tract A, in terms of it being a usable space, one of the recommended conditions is to consider reducing the front yards of the lots that are, I'll go back to that previous slide, of the lots the front yards that are adjacent to Tract A, of reducing the front yards could widen that tract a bit and make it more usable. And so in the briefing there's discussion of the goals and guidelines from Appendix A, which do support balancing the public realm of Tract A with the privacy of the residences and designing the space so that it's usable and by all the residents. And so the goals and guidelines really support that the space be accessible to all the residents and usable, and provide some direction in terms of location. So I'll just go through some of the recommended new conditions that staff is recommending to address the issues that were brought up regarding Tract A. And they're all listed in the briefing memo. So and I'm sorry that the couldn't increase the font size to make it very readable and still have it fit on the slide. But the first new condition, condition number 41, is that the lots 29 through 35 that are fronting on Tract A, it's to address their relationship to the tract so that there's privacy for the residents, but yet the interface with the open space tract, the tract still remains publicly accessible and usable. So the condition 41 is really addressing specifics regarding the homes that would front on Tract A, that they provide a front door that faces the tract, a front walkway to and from the trail, which is located in the tract, in the open space, that the facade and detailing conveys that it looks like the front of the homes, because the idea is that the homes fronting that open space, that the front doors actually face out onto it. And that if there's fencing or landscaping, that it be less than 48 inches in height, so that the homes aren't completely walled off. And there's something to be said for having having private residences looking out onto a public tract in terms of some public eye and just some watchfulness over the tract. And so that's another advantage of balancing the fact that private residences front onto the public open space. In terms of addressing the requirements that the tract be designed for active use, condition 42, incorporate children as an integral user of Tract A, including varied opportunities for children's play. The overall design will respond to the variety of residents and users of Tract A, maximizing its usability while recognizing that passive areas and a transition to adjacent open space are necessary and appropriate. And this would be reviewed with utility permits as well as the administrative site development permit for the open space tracts. That's another thing that I want to emphasize, is that the open space tract, the design of it will go through a separate permit review through an administrative site development permit. And after I get through with these conditions, we have a graphic of a draft design concept for the Tract A, and the applicant can go through the features of that. New condition 43 is intended to provide to ensure that Tract A includes a usable area, because there is a slope along Tract A and along the west side of the property there. So within Tract A, the plat shall provide a relatively flat area of a minimum of 2,000 square feet, and flat is defined as a 2 to 3% maximum slope. And again, this will be reviewed with the ASDP for the tract. Condition 44 is to ensure that Tract A is accessible, that there's an easement to ensure common use of the tract by the community. New condition 45 is that Tract A will be widened by reducing the front yards of the adjacent homes in order to create usable open space as required in the goals and guidelines, and approximately as shown on the revised plan, which is in the briefing memo. So we didn't get specific as to the amount of the front yard that would have to be reduced. Wanted to leave that to the design of the space, but that condition does enable the city to require that the width, because the width of Tract A as shown was, I believe, 28 feet, correct? About 28 feet. So, even 5 feet or so could make it much more comparable to some of the other open space tracts in the Highlands and make it that much more usable. Condition number 46 is it's regarding the fact that, and I don't know if I could, surrounding Tract A to the west is open space. It's presently city-owned, but it's slated to be conveyed to the county as open space. But and this goes back to what I was referring to in terms of borrowing adjacent open space. So the adjacent property, there is a critical area steep slope. It's largely vegetated with blackberries and alder saplings, and so there's some potential of having the applicant improve some of the vegetation that would be adjacent to it, which would also further increase the perception of the space and also deal a little bit with just the interface between Tract A and the adjacent open space. So new condition 46, the recommendation is that the applicant collaborate with the city to identify possible improvements and enhancements to the vegetation on the open space land adjacent to Tract A with the approval of the adjacent property owner. So those are the new conditions that we're recommending to address the issues that were identified for Tract A, and with that, if the applicant would like to come up and address the design of Tract A, the concept, we can pull that up.
Good evening. So this concept is literally just that. It was a concept at this point.
Glenn, excuse me, I think
Yes.
for the first time, if you could state
Oh,
your name.
sorry about that.
That's all right.
My name is Glenn Sprague. I'm with Core Design on behalf of the applicant of Ichijo.
Thank you.
So, as I said, this open space concept is just that. It was an attempt to show exactly what we could do in that space with the guidelines and the criteria that were given to us. This area right here in the darker was considered ornamental grass and plantings that would be native and low maintenance, drought tolerant plants. Obviously, my landscape architect will take into account what can be put there based on the vegetation and the shade and everything else that's there. And in the corner there, so he has his walkway space, and up here in the corner is a plaza area which could be used for seating. Obviously, I believe what he has there right now is a 12 or 13 foot diameter concrete with a seat wall around it, so you could sit in it basically and as a gathering space. Again, these are just concepts. Looking at other aspects, we could obviously, because of the condition, to I don't remember which number it was, number 43. Maybe it was one with the children, basically integrating the children into the a children's active space, 42. He doesn't have that on here. There's room for it, depending on what it is. We spoke at the last meeting, we were all pretty much in agreement that we were not looking for a large vertical structure, like a rainbow playset. That is not what we're intending to do here. This would be much more on the ground, a little bit more benign, you could say, but certainly offer something for the children to do. And again, we haven't vetted that out with what it could be, but there's many options that we can use. Same with this plaza area. If it's deemed that it needs that the area or the overall width of Tract A needs to be widened, my response to the city on that was to not give me a hard number of 35 feet, because or whatever the number may be, as I wanted to open that up for my design team to basically come up with an idea of what could be used. And if it was 35 feet in one spot but didn't need to be uniformly 35 feet, we could mitigate basically some of the take from the lots that are on that tier, and perhaps maybe not make it so linear. Put some feature to it, so some of the lots are a little bit longer than others. As you're waking your way up there, put a little bit more interest into the shape of the tract itself. At the last minute, it didn't show up on this, but I did talk to my landscape architect of perhaps making it wider down here and adding some feature down there, because at the south end there isn't much there other than just kind of an entry point, but making a sort of a focal point on each bookend of the tract itself. The upper end, where the round plaza area, seemed like a natural area for a gathering spot with the intersection of the three paths coming through. So with that.
So two things. One, I want to apologize that you didn't get this ahead of time. We didn't realize that it wasn't attached to the memo until we started going through it tonight. So I realize you guys haven't seen this before, but it is a concept. So. And the second point is, I think since this is kind of a big topic, instead of moving on to the other things in the briefing memo, this would probably be a good time to go ahead and have discussion, if you have questions for the applicant or staff.
I just want to say that I think this is a vast improvement over what we talked about in the last meeting, and it certainly makes a lot more sense. I kind of like the concept.
Good, thank you.
So first of all, I want to thank Peter and Glenn and everybody involved for taking our comments so seriously and coming back with some ideas and some answers to that. You guys did a great job. I appreciate that. I had one question, maybe Peter, this might be for you, on condition number 41, where it talks about fencing or landscape 48 inches in height. And does that need to be any wording about maintained at 48 inches? So if it's planting, if someone plants at 48, I'm thinking along, Katsura, where people have planted things that are shielding the entire 12-foot, the front of their house right now. So I don't know if it needs to be maintained. And if it's fencing, does it have to be some type of open fencing, which I think we've looked at other plats before. So those are half question, half statements.
It's a good point that the condition, it just says that it be less than 48 inches in height. It could be added that it be maintained.
Although if you look at the last sentence.
Well, it does say the final plat will restrict landscape and structure heights on the west edge. So
It still doesn't say maintained is the point.
Well, but if it's restricted to that height, then it doesn't matter whether you're maintaining it or that's the mature height. You just can't go beyond that.
Oh, okay.
I mean, that's the way I would interpret it.
That's
So,
not how I would interpret it.
okay.
So because it's conditioned with the building permit that, again, if it's landscape, planting it is one thing, which you restrict the planting to 48, but doesn't necessarily maintained.
Okay.
I'm not a lawyer, but I watch them on TV.
I have a question.
Eric?
Item number 45, new item 45. It says the track A will be widened. So right now, the current width of track A, you said, is
About 27
28
feet, 27, 28 feet.
27, 28 feet. And so what's the possibility of widening it as far as you're going to take that away from the front yards of those homes? So right now, what is the width of the front yard? I mean, how much room do you even have to play with is a question I have, I guess.
I would say about 6 feet is about as far as you would want to go. More, I mean, from the 20, making it 30 feet.
So I don't want to nail down how far you're going to go. I just want to have a, what's the maximum? So right now, what is the front yardage? What's the width of the front yard? Or do you have that?
I don't really have that
Because you still haven't got the home sort of narrowed down right. Okay, so you're saying you don't want to go more than 6 feet?
not really, because
All
then you're making just a token little,
Right, I
patch in
understand.
front of your front yard.
I just want to get an idea
Yeah,
of,
how much
are
you
we
have to play with.
talking inches, feet, or, what's the possibility of widening that? So, and then, are there sidewalks that go along the front? I see, it
Right
looks like there are.
Along here is the common walk that would be within the tract, that would connect the front door entrances with the north end and the south end. So there is a walkway
Okay,
in the tract, and which is what I mentioned earlier, that within the guidelines, there's a possibility of putting some character to that sidewalk so it isn't so linear and straight up there, but that's this artist and flourish at this point. There is a connection, there has to be a connection actually, because these are alley-loaded homes, so they must have a front door connection on this side of the house.
so when it mentions utility easement, is that sort of included there as far as utility easement?
As far as the condition,
No, it just shows on some of the drawings, it shows a utility easement. That
there is a utility easement
looks
because
like
of
a
the
sidewalk.
It's going in the same area. It's taking stormwater, roof drain from, I believe, this home up here, 36, and this tier, and it's going to the south.
Okay.
So there would be a utility in there, a private utility.
Okay, thank you.
Just a couple of quick questions. I concur with the other folks who are saying thank you for addressing all the comments. I think it is a lot better. With regards to the new number 41, when I'm reading, if a builder or homeowner desires low fencing or landscape along the park property line, first of all, the walkway, I thought it was an easement through the property, or is it an easement through the tract A?
Through the
Okay.
tract.
So
The walkway is not on their property.
okay, so it would be on the fencing would be on the north side of the walkway, is that?
East.
East side of the walkway. Okay, now I got it. Wait, now I got it. Okay. Let's see, and just a question in terms of, letting homeowners or builders decide. It just seems like you might end up with a lot of different things, by having, you've got 6 different homes, so you might have a fence line, nothing, a fence, you might have 12 inches, you might have
48.
48, yeah.
I'd
Yeah.
actually defer that.
Yeah, I guess. But just, when I'm thinking about it, I'm thinking a nice stone wall across all 6 would look kind of neat. kind of
Correct.
Dividing.
I would mostly defer this to Peter, as he's the one who wrote that as far as builder or homeowner, but I would suspect that the ARC would have something to say about an inconsistency from one home to the next.
Okay.
I would not expect them to ever approve a picket fence and a stone wall, then a 48-foot brick wall, then a fence and an iron grate.
Okay.
So just the comment that the design of the homes and fences would go through the architectural review committee.
Okay.
So they would be looking at the materials and
Great. Okay.
compatibility, consistency.
Okay, thanks. And then on number 43, is the purpose of that just to kind of the 2,000 square feet, 2 to 3% grade? Is it to come up with just an area where maybe they can throw a ball around or something? I mean, a relatively flat area?
Yeah, that's to address that there is a defined usable area within the tract.
Okay, so 2,000 square feet. I thought maybe you might want to add contiguous or continuous or something so that it defines that that's what it's meant to be. Because it's, I mean, we're talking about what, 8,100 square feet or something like that?
Over 8,000 square feet, yeah.
Yeah, and just within that, you can get 2,000 square feet pretty easily, yeah. Except, yeah, the blackberry bushes, but. Did that make sense, Peter?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, that's it. Thanks.
The perfect segue. The contiguous word was in my notes too. Thank you. Well, you think alike. I too thank the staff and the applicant. I enjoyed these improvements. I want to also thank Connie Marsh, who brought up the idea at the end of the meeting last week about taking advantage of neighboring property, yeah, and seeing what we could do with that to make a larger space. So she's not here, but thank you, Connie, if you're listening. So in number 43, I agree that I think that there should be some words that say perhaps relatively flat, comma, contiguous area, because we've talked about this before, and when we were looking for a plaza in the town center for Issaquah Highlands, it was the usability of it was that it was all in one place. However, after many years, there were the creative ideas of putting that space in many little chunks around. And so yeah, I think that contiguous word is very important. I'm glad you brought that up. I also wondered if it had been considered and how you would consider it, because you wouldn't want to be too restrictive. You want something creative happening here, that the 2,000 square feet have some sort of proportion. I mean, it could be 1 foot by 1,000. I mean, that's silly, but 2 feet by 1,000. Is there any need, and did anybody go down that path and say, hey, you can't do it that way, or?
I know it will be reviewed by the ASDP, and if I was to suggest or propose a usable area that was clearly skirting the issue by making it 1 foot wide along there, I'm sure I would get some pushback from the ASD, from the review.
Good enough. I'll leave it at that. And then in the new 46, I wanted to suggest when we, in looking at the narrative on the previous page where the applicant said that they agree that there's an opportunity to increase with an A, and the applicant would be willing to discuss improving or enhancing the vegetation on the adjacent open space, but the condition says that the applicant would collaborate with the city merely to identify possible improvements. And I wondered if the word should be identify and provide agreed upon improvements.
We actually wanted to keep that as open as we could because we actually don't know what we can do. Mm-hmm. And we didn't want to put a condition. I mean, speaking with the applicant, or with the city, I should say, we were reluctant to put actual condition in there without knowing what we could or couldn't do. At this stage of the game, we're willing to, again, discuss and soon to condition to actually explore any possible outcomes and see how far we can go with it at that point. But to put in there that we would maintain or would do something when, in fact, we might not be able to, could create some issues down the road. So we elected to keep it a little bit more vague on purpose.
I agree with you, and if I could just follow up a little bit, that when it comes down to it, all that's going to be left is the conditions, and who's going to look back on this and see that the applicant thought that it might be nice and they would be willing to provide some of it. So I didn't mean to say that you would provide any or all of it, but that the spirit was not just to list it, but to participate. And so that's why I was suggesting some language without saying how much. Mm-hmm. It's something that was mutually agreed on. That's what I was saying. And then I was really glad to hear, though, what you said earlier about the kind of treatment that would be done on that property would be to some sort of, all along there, low maintenance, native, drought tolerant stuff, not fancy stuff, just get rid of alders and blackberries, so that it's low maintenance for the city as well. That's all I have.
Eric?
I just want to add that onto that, if there isn't some possibility of a slightly enhanced language, like, if the feasibility exists, that there might be a more serious commitment to provide that vegetation. If there's a feasibility, I mean, obviously if you look at it and there's something that's preventing you from doing it, but it'd be nice to get a little bit more, of a stronger commitment that, if the possibility is there, we will try to do what we can to enhance that space a little bit more. I'd like to see that explored more as far as language.
Yeah, and Eric, I think what you're saying is that one of the whole reasons why this slender tract is palatable is because we expect something not just to be identified, but actually to be done with the space beside it. And
Otherwise, it's just
some
lost
effort.
conversation,
Yeah.
if we don't try to enhance it a little bit more.
So the challenge is you can't require them through a plat to take action on property that's not theirs. So this is the kind of language that we've proposed for you before. For instance, at Division 95, when you wanted, and we wanted, and they wanted a trail to connect from Division 95 into Division 96, and yet the trail would have to be on Division 96's property. All we can do is really encourage them to take that action and to try and help facilitate it. But because since they don't own or control that property, and Peter and I, as wonderful as we are, can't commit the city to do this. I mean, we have begun talks higher up, but at this point, that's the most we can do, is to encourage this collaboration and hope that it's fruitful.
Otherwise, it's sort of a condition within a condition within a condition, right?
Looks like Russian doll.
Michael?
Thank you. Would the city assume maintenance costs of that adjacent land if we were to improve it?
Don't look at me, I'm the city.
I think there's potentially two options. One is the city assumes maintenance, and the other is the Highlands Community Association. I'm sorry, the Highlands Homeowner Association is the other option. Either the city or, because I believe that the Homeowners Association does maintain some open space that's on city property.
So there is precedence for the Highlands maintaining property that they do not own up there on the trails there? Okay.
And the third option is that you install something that's, after establishment doesn't require maintenance, which may, as open space, be the most appropriate choice.
Right, and I think that's sort of the plant palette that we're looking at. It's a steep slope. Part of it's a critical area steep slope, and so, not looking for types of plantings that are going to need regular active maintenance. I mean, even native landscapes need some, but minimal.
Well, that was I guess that leads to my second question there. With that critical area right there, are we encouraging intrusion into that critical area? And I assume it's not sensitive other than we don't want to ruin the planting on that slope because of the slope of it, but.
Well, I think anything that's done on there would avoid soil disturbance and grading, and so it would just be really planting, which should add to stability. And typically, code encourages removing invasive plants, which there's a lot of blackberry.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Michael. I'll take this opportunity. I see Mr. Kapler moving to the edge of his seat, so I'll remind folks that there's a sign up and we'll have public comment towards the end of the applicant and staff presentation. Scott, did you have any questions? Thanks, Glenn. Thanks, Peter. Guess we're on to the next, the Wooner one.
What we're handing out to the commission now is an email that we received today from David Kapler.
And,
A little closer, Peter, it's still.
sorry? What we're handing out to commission members is an email that we received from David Kapler today regarding not specifically Tract A, but partly Tract A, and just the point that the entire parcel is surrounded by open space that will eventually go to King County, and just addressing some of the issues of the interface with that open space. Not sure that there is very much in here specifically regarding Tract A, except, but I think it does support looking at the adjacent lands to address the interface between the plat and the adjacent open space.
Any more comment? Any more comment, questions on this, or wait till Mr. Kapler has a moment to speak later?
Yeah, I'm interested to hear what he has to say. This does bring up a couple interesting points. I know the public can't necessarily see this right now, but there's a discussion about, let's see, discussing a real plan for management of the open space to the west of Parcel A, and there's a discussion of hazard trees, and I know those can be rather expensive. My HOA is going through there right now. It's about $2,400 per tree, so there's real costs associated with this. So I would like to hear more about this. So.
One of the issues that was brought up at the last meeting was hazard trees and blowdowns, and so that we will address that separately. I don't know if we want to move on from Tract A, or do we want to address move on to the other topics? Okay.
We always reserve the right to backtrack, Peter, so.
Okay, no problem. So, one of the other issues that was discussed was Woonorf 1, which is on the south part of the tract, and it serves several homes, and also the alley, which provides the rear access to these homes, comes off of Woonorf 1. And the issue was that the original recommendation was that the west end remain private, and that was due to some concern about public utilities that would be in there and that require maintenance, and so some maintenance concerns. After discussions with Public Works Operations and the applicant, staff is suggesting that revising the condition that all of Woonorf 1 could be maybe dedicated as public right-of-way if it's designed that public utilities located in the Woonorf do not need regular routine maintenance, and that if this can't be accomplished, then Woonorf 1 to the west of the alley would remain private and maintained by the IHCA or Parcel 2 Homeowners Association. Any comments or?
So quick question on that. Who decides, says if it is designed so that public utilities do not need? So is that the city says, yes, this works for us?
It would be looked at.
Dan says it works for him? Or yes to my question?
It'd be looked at with utility permits, but perhaps Dan
might want to elaborate on what utilities would be okay there in terms of not needing regular routine maintenance.
It is the city's decision on whether the condition has been met or not. And that would be determined during utility permit review. And we've encountered this situation many times in the past, and we have a fairly unambiguous set of rules and circumstances that we employ with operations to do this.
Okay, it seemed like that should be the case. I just want to make sure it was backed up. Thanks, Dan.
Is there, excuse me, is there a reason why it can't be developed so that so that they can have regular routine maintenance on it? Is there some reason why we have this question?
Yes, if a public works operations vehicle needs to routinely go down to the end, they need space to turn around. And there isn't space to turn around there currently.
And I gather the way that that the developer has designed this, they would not be able to offer the opportunity to make a turnaround at the end.
There's two options: either provide the turnaround or eliminate the need to have to go down there so you don't have to turn around. There's less impact on the plat, the current plat layout and the adjacent homes, if we eliminate the need to access there rather than provide the turnaround and embed it in the geometry that's left remaining.
Oh, okay.
Is it too premature to have any kind of idea of whether that need's going to be there or not?
No, there's a solution. There is a solution on the table now.
Oh, okay.
From the applicant that does not require routine maintenance. So it's, in my opinion, this is a relatively easy condition for them to meet.
Oh, that sounds really good. I appreciate that, Dan. Thank
Sure.
you.
Scott?
Could we get some clarification specific to parking availability within the moonroof? Is that expected to be on the north end or the north side?
Jeff thanks you, by the way. Yeah. Actually get to it.
In terms of parking on Woonurf 1, there is some on-street parking for guest parking, and we're going to discuss, parking wasn't an issue that was brought up, and so we'll provide a little more detail on parking, but in terms of the Woonurf, there's what was it, 12? Eight. Right, but you were just asking on Woonurf. There, on the number of parking stalls on the streets, there's 18 total on Road A and Woonurf 1. I believe there's 8.
So yes, they are on the north side.
Excuse me?
I think his question was if they're on the north side of the parking
Yeah.
of the Woonurf,
Sorry,
and
okay, yeah,
that would
they're
be
on
yes.
the north side of
Okay.
Woonurf.
I appreciate that clarification.
Sorry.
One other follow-up question, kind of going back to landscaping, if you will, is tree placement. My question being, is there any intention or intent to have trees placed on the southern property lines? Otherwise, it looks relatively sparse to me. So if you could clarify that.
Are you asking along the lots or?
Along the lots, along the sidewalk, at street side, is there any intent to have trees located on the southern section.
Scott, are you talking about along the Woonerf or on the, okay.
The Woonerf doesn't typically have street trees. There'd be street trees on Road A, but Woonerfs they don't have curbs, and they're intended more as for narrow pedestrian access, and so you don't really want that kind of separation between vehicles and pedestrians and the homes that you would on a typical street using street trees. So there wouldn't be street trees on the Woonerf.
So, not to contradict you, but I think that what Scott may be thinking of is in Division 95, we actually put a condition requiring, because the whole thing was a Woonerf, and so, which you guys loved. And so there was a condition requiring almost like street tree spacing of trees along there, but that was because it was the only roadway and it was so long. And it was partly also because we didn't have buildings on both sides. And so we were concerned that it kind of needed that to feel tight and help encourage vehicles to go more slowly.
Yeah.
So I think that's maybe why we proposed it in one situation and not in another.
Okay. I guess my train of thought here is that we're very sparse in regards to green space within what I'm seeing here. And if there's an opportunity that we could add some greenery, whether on the southern end or otherwise, I think that would be a benefit for consideration.
Jim?
Thank you. I'm glad we got the update from Dan on the discussion of the Woonerf and whether it's going to be public or private, and I'm sure Glenn would be really happy if it became entirely public. But just in case, we had that clause in there, if you could go back to that slide, talking about if it had to be privately owned, that it would be the IHCA or the local homeowners, what is it, Parcel 2 homeowners. Does that mean that the applicant is going to form a community homeowners association? So is there even going to be a Parcel 2 homeowners association?
Tim, could you come up to the microphone just so that you're on record?
Hi, Tim Walsh with Ichijo. We haven't gotten to that detail with IHCA, but since they are individual lots and individual family homes, unlike many areas in the Highlands where you have shared utilities and shared buildings and roof lines, there wouldn't necessarily need to be a separate homeowners association. There's a Issaquah Community Highlands Association, of which every residence is a member, would handle most of those issues, I think.
Okay. And it might be a minor point, and it might actually be moot, as we've discussed, but I think it might be helpful just to put in there the Parcel 2 Homeowners Association, if formed.
Well, I think what this is saying is if the IHC doesn't take it, they're going to have to form one. I mean, that's not what we're asking for, but someone has to.
So the IHCA could decline it and say you have to.
Right, especially because they're not here to identify whether they want it or not. It's sort of the same situation that we can't obligate someone who hasn't accepted that responsibility.
The point is, as Dan mentioned, to design it the way it needs to be designed.
We just have to be careful. We don't know if it's going to be so.
I do appreciate that resolution, though, or the efforts towards that.
Bill?
I gather it would be either or. Either IHCA accepts Parcel 2, or else the homeowners themselves have to form an association. So it's either or. It's not without. Otherwise, you could have the people down on that end there having to pay for all that by themselves.
Right, and that is another possibility. I mean,
That be made
right,
known to
but
them.
we're not, that's not the way it's written right now.
But if it should come to pass, then is that going to be explain to possible buyers to that effect so they can make a choice?
It would be on the final plat, so it would be part of the title report,
Yeah. Interesting.
says the real estate man.
WHA. Okay, I think we're moving on to area condition 14, looks like.
Right. So another issue that was brought up was just some concerns. The condition 14 is really repeats a code requirement that's in the development agreement. And I believe the concern of some commissioners was that it addresses that the applicant shall monitor edges of hazard trees and blowdowns. So we just wanted to provide a little further explanation on this, that the intent of this is to ensure that the city doesn't have the responsibility for removing hazard trees that are created due to the clearing, and that the applicant's aware of this responsibility. On the ground, in actuality, there will be city inspectors that will be on site during clearing and grading, and will also be monitoring hazard trees, and typically what happens is the city inspectors coordinate with the city arborist if they see trees at the edge that once they're exposed at the edge that look like they're leaning and are potential hazard trees, or when the clearing is being done and it goes into drip lines of trees that could compromise the health of the tree. Typically, inspectors coordinate with the city arborist to review this in the field. So we're not recommending a change to the conditions, but we just wanted to provide some additional information that it's not entirely on the applicant in terms of the monitoring.
So a quick question based upon the language that we have here. Indication is that applicant would or shall monitor the edges. Who therefore takes responsibility in the event there is a blowdown as far as removal? Does that need to be specified?
It should be clear in the condition that the intent of the condition is that the applicant's responsible for removing the trees and for replanting.
Okay.
That's what the intent of the condition is.
Okay, thank you.
Should that maybe be changed from the applicant shall monitor to the applicant will monitor?
Well, as I mentioned at the outset, this is an existing code requirement that's in the development agreement. So the condition was really just repeating the code requirement.
Michael, you had a question earlier about blowdown. Does that address what you were looking for?
Only on the property and only where logging occurs, but not on the adjacent open space where no logging would occur, I would assume. And then this is a 3-year time frame, so where we would create that open space, and whether or not the city or the homeowners association assumes that, I don't think this necessarily covers that, because there's first of all the 3-year clause, and second of all the logging clause on this. So it, for me, doesn't really answer that question.
Okay.
Well, this is intended for the adjacent open space, for hazard trees and blowdowns on the adjacent open space.
Yeah, I understand that, but it does say where logging occurs, and then and it is only a 3-year period. So.
I think the thought is that if there's hazard trees that are created due to the grading, that will be evident within 3 years of the clearing.
And so to ask the applicant to be responsible in perpetuity for blowdowns and hazard trees on off of their site is
I'm not asking the applicant. I wouldn't
Right.
suggest that. What I'm concerned that the city may assume responsibility for the adjacent lands, and they will have to take care of this. That's my concern, is more cost to the city or a homeowners association. So I have a 20-year-old tree in my neighborhood where we're going through this process right now. So it is beyond 3 years. And then with the ice storms that we may have every decade or so, you could have occurrences after logging, much after logging. So I don't know if there's an answer for it. I'm just raising the concerns.
Nina, you had a question? Nope. Okay.
Well, I mean, that land isn't going to be the city's. It'll be King County's.
So it'll come out of your other taxes, not,
Yeah.
Out of, not your right pocket, your left
Yeah,
pocket.
the left one. All right.
And there's, you know, as you well know, there's always big weather events that create lots of hazard trees and blowdowns. You know, and that can occur after 3 years. That can occur at any time. But the intent of the condition is not to hold them responsible for the weather events. It's more of whether trees become hazard trees due to the grading of the site.
okay. Parking? That's right.
So questions came up just to clarify exactly how much parking would be provided. So each lot will have a two-car garage, and that meets the parking requirement in the development agreement, that in and of itself. In addition, 17 of the 36 homes will have driveways that are 18 feet in length to accommodate extra parking, and that was another area of discussion about having that, making it evident that driveways are either of sufficient length to park a vehicle or short enough that it's obvious that vehicles can't be parked, so you don't end up with a situation where people are parking in driveways that overhang the sidewalks. So 17 of the homes would have driveways that are sufficient in length for accommodating additional parking. And then, as we discussed before, there's 18 parallel parking stalls, 20-foot long stalls that are provided on Road A and Woo North 1. And we'll be looking at the location of hydrants and curb cuts and the mail kiosks to ensure that that these parking stalls will remain available and aren't inhibited by utilities or other site improvements during the utility permits.
So I have a question. This might be for I'm sorry, Peter, were you done? Didn't mean to cut you off.
So just that we weren't recommending any change to any of the conditions with that.
So this might be for the applicant, and I think we may have discussed it last time, but is it stipulated that the garages have room for not only these generous size two-car garage, I said with tongue in cheek, but also for the yard waste, recycling, trash, bear traps, whatever else is we get mandated we store in our garage?
There is a condition. I don't have the staff report right in front of me to know which condition it was, but there's definitely
Okay.
a condition that addresses exactly what
But
you're
it
saying.
has to have room for both the cars and those things. Jeff is not here to speak out, so I don't think there's a real question, but I would reinforce, I think we have 19, if we have 17 of the homes have 18-foot length driveways, that's 19 without, and we still don't have a detailed parking plan, and the U.S. Postal Service will chew up 2 of those spaces with mailboxes. I share his concern that I don't think we have enough parking in this plat.
That proposal right there is 108 parking stalls. If you're assuming one parking stall for the 17 driveways. So it's three drivers per house. Yeah.
Just looking at the reality of what we've seen.
No, yeah, absolutely. And then, yeah, the garages, well, I'm curious what the definition of generous is, because Taos had generous parking stalls, didn't it?
You got both your Mini Coopers in there?
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments on parking? Eric?
This is a little bit on the parking side of it as far as, and I don't know if we have the purview on this, but signage as far as ensuring people are going to be wanting to park to the extreme where they block driveways or they block, access to the alley by pushing the envelope of going past the curves. And so I noticed in some developments, they have signs, no parking between signs for a driveway. And then I see some developments like mine that doesn't have the sign, and you have people actually blocking the driveway because the sign's not there. So is that something that's in our purview to request or ask for guidelines on that? Or is that just something that you can address?
Help me out, Peter, there we go. Driveways are along this side of the street here. You can see the driveway cuts. There is no parallel parking on that side of the street. It's on the other side.
So in this case, I would probably specify the south end of that Woonerf and the alleyway. There's going to be temptation, I would think, to try to park and block
Here?
to some extent the Woonerf or the alleyway. So that's my question right there.
I would presume we would handle this with parking striping and a designated spot.
Right, so that presumption I see where in other developments that failed.
So.
I'm not quite
just-
sure how much
just to
different a
say
sign
that
would do.
We do learn.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so those kinds of areas where Glenn's pointing, like that southern area
Right.
that you were identifying, Eric, they would be marked as no parking fire lanes so that the fire department could tow because, that doesn't mean the fire department's up there every day, but it is a higher level of no parkingness.
Right.
That's a word.
Not knowing how that's set up, where some developments you actually have where the parking is curved in, so there's a curb. I can't tell there if that's actually a curb there or not. Is that a curb?
Well, there's no curb on a Woonerf,
Right.
but it is curved
So
here
Right.
to create the impression that you have an inset parking stall here
Okay.
and here.
All right.
And as Lucy said, this would probably be a fire lane, no parking, or all the way along there.
Okay, so that's the only thing is I like to see if I can help the residents to ensure and have a sign where, you don't have people going off all the way into the alleyway to park.
Likewise with the north end here, there's no parking on the right-hand side of the street to block this alley
Right.
until
right.
you get here.
And that's really well developed, so that's
Right.
pretty well explained, but.
And to speak to Jeff's comments in his email where he was concerned about driveways blocking much what you were saying, there is no parking on the north side or the east side where there are driveways.
Right.
So you won't have an issue where people are parking to block. They'd be in the drive lane if they did that.
Lucy, will there be someone who reviews this again to make sure that the no parkingness is, I like the word, by the way,
Nest. Has the no parkingness be nest?
that gets reviewed? I mean, because I think if it's something like you mentioned where it's painted red, people seem to notice and do something. Otherwise, I drive past someone just about every day who parks out there where you think that there's no parking. So
I think normally the planner who reviews the plat, which is Peter, is likely to be the person who sees it all the way through, partly so that they have your comments ringing in their head. The second thing is we tend not to use striping because then there's a maintenance aspect, so signs tend to last longer. and they're maybe less unsightly. Third thing is that while it's absolutely correct that Vooners don't have curbs, they do next to parking because to keep them from driving off the edge because
Right.
you often can't see. So the parking down there where
There.
Glenn's pointing would
Turn
actually
curb.
have curbs, and so those areas would be more defined than just striping.
And Peter's phone number and name is actually part of the official document, right? So,
Speaking
Super, thank you.
on the topic of driving off the curb, a clarifying question specific to the southwest corner next to property number 22. The Wooner abuts the green space, and I'm curious, in that section there, what is the intended mechanism to block that green space from? Yeah. Well, no, to keep cars from going into that space, right? So you've got an entry point there.
There would be something to keep a car from going. It would be a curb, most likely.
A curb, okay, okay.
actually,
Thank you.
Jeff's going to stand there.
I'd option a boulder personally, but you just never know.
Nina?
Thank you, Carl. And thank you for pointing that out. I did kind of wonder if I were parking down there, is the neighbor going to mind that I turn around in their driveway? And it's a Wooner, so they should. I don't know. Looks like something was overlooked. I want to chime in, because it will be ringing in Peter's ears, or somebody's, about the generous-sized two-car garages, where there could be some helpful, predictable language on behalf of the developer, so that they don't come back and somebody say, well, this isn't generous enough. Well, that the generous should be identified very clearly. And my anecdotal observation the other day was in West Highlands Park. There was a very nice car sitting outside of a very nice, very expensive view home, and was obviously unable to get that car even in the garage, regardless of whether there was garbage receptacles in there or not. So generous, I wish it were better defined for the sake of the applicant, so that they wouldn't have to be guessing. And then the other thing is I wanted to ask about the access to the parking stalls. The last paragraph that was on the text slide, where it says access to the parking stalls will not be inhibited by other utility or on-site improvements. This is a great response to the discussion we had last week. But I wondered, is that something that's in a condition? Because again, as we look at this narrative here, if it's not in the conditions, fear it's not, it gets lost. So is that a condition? Is that why it says that that is the case?
You know, I'm sorry, I was looking through the conditions in the staff report because I was sure we had one that specified about garages having
I know, I
enough
thought there was
space
too,
for-
and it may
for
just,
2 garbage containers, and
it
was
may
very
just be in the
detailed.
body, because it was already there and we didn't need to condition it. And I guess, A, you do need to have a little faith in us. B, there's, in terms of sizing, it's partly based on parking stalls. And so that the code basis that we have is, you're either doing 2 standard stalls plus room for the 3 garbage cans, or to some extent it's a standard and a compact, but you can't do that through the whole plat. And that's as much code control as we get. The piece that you were just asking about was, Nina, that's just kind of beyond what we can specify in a plat, but I think the importance of it is that it's in this memo. And, we're setting up an expectation both for staff and for the applicant that these are the kinds of things that we have said that we're going to do, so we're going to do them. I mean, every utility isn't identified, or mail kiosks, but the applicant wants as much on-street parking as we do, and we don't get to wrestle with USPS, but I'm sure they're very good at it.
Can I ask a question? I don't think it's the purview of this committee, I understand that, but are the garages, does the city ask for garages to accommodate like a standard size sedan? In other words, where you wouldn't really be able to get a Suburban, in there, or,
About the standard compact.
or is it designed for a Prius? Or I was just curious what the standards are in that regard.
I think we would use at least a compact parking stall as a,
I'm just asking, as far as the building codes, what we require in the size of a garage. to be able
I don't
to
know that it's in
accommodate-
the building code, but I think
Alright.
we would be looking that the garages accommodate what is a compact, the dimensions of a compact parking stall, which is 16 by 8.
So,
Okay.
so when we say compact and standard, we're not referring to the car sizes, we're referring to regulated parking stall sizes. So there, in the parking code, there's, as Peter said, 16 by 8 or 9 by 18 and a half are the standard stalls. So most of them, garages would have to have 2 standard size stalls. That would be the minimum size that would have to be accommodated. And occasionally we do a standard and a compact if there's an unusual configuration.
Thanks.
More? We done? Hopefully we're getting closer to the faster one, otherwise we might be here later than we expect. We can talk about anything, I'm sure.
So the next issue that was discussed was just clarification of the fencing for the lots that are adjacent to buffers, and that really only applies to that really only applies to the lots that are adjacent to the wetland buffer along the east side of the property. And so the question was just to clarify the type of fencing that would be required. And so recommending a revision to condition 36 that the fencing on the lots that are adjacent to the critical areas be 4 feet tall, open, decorative, non-galvanized metal fences. And there's a picture there that shows the type of fence that be looking for. And in addition, there would be some signs identifying the critical area buffer on the adjacent property.
Surely we can find no controversy for this.
Yeah, every other property line, I know it seems like a minor issue there. Does that mean every other lot will have a sign on it adjacent to the wetlands?
I think that was the intent, is that it wouldn't be on every single lot, but on every other one there'd be a sign.
It would actually end up on every one. It's just that you don't have it on both corners. You only have it on one corner.
Okay.
And we
Oh,
put
you're
it right
putting it-
on the property line so that it isn't blocking people's view of the critical.
Mike,
Sorry, turned it off. My etiquette's dropping. Right. It would be on one of your corners, back corners, but not both corners. And it would be on the property line, so it wasn't in your main view towards the open space.
there's no reason to have 2 at the T. Cool. Anything else? Moving along.
All right. One of the other subjects that was discussed was low-impact development, and so we just wanted to provide more information to the commission on this, that there was a administrative minor modification on stormwater, and in that condition requires that at least 25% of the roadways or alleys be pervious or infiltrate stormwater. So it doesn't specify that the roadways or alleys have to be pervious pavement. There's a number of ways that the condition can be accomplished. It could be pervious but the main objective is that that 25% of that impervious surface area be infiltrated. And so the specific low-impact development techniques would be determined with the utility permit, and generally we're anticipating that these are small-scale, low-impact development facilities that would be privately owned and maintained. It would only be larger ones that would be publicly owned, maintained, and this is anticipated that they would be smaller scale. Moving
Michael?
along.
Do you have any idea where those would go? Where the stormwater would collect and be distributed?
At this point, I don't know. Have you thought about where you're?
We have determined some options. We haven't vetted that out necessarily. Part of that condition was that it was privately owned or privately maintained, so we would have to vet that out. But there is sufficient possibility to take the drainage, 25% of the drainage of Road A and up here, and put in a rain garden in the curbing there or in the curbing there, and there is sufficient room for that. There are other options as well. We haven't really pursued all of that at this point in time, but it did not seem anything that was insurmountable.
Okay. And then my second question is, so let me see the language of that again. Would the entire portion of that low-impact development be privately owned, including the impervious surface? So would that be a city road with?
Road A is intended to all be city-owned here.
And would that be the
All of it.
surface that would be pervious to rainwater there?
We aren't anticipating doing any pervious pavement.
Okay.
There's an option. We pursuing there. I know City of Issaquah did one. I don't remember the actual street it was, but City of Issaquah did do. It was in the public, and it was a section of pavement that was pervious. So there certainly is. I mean, this is crying out for being pervious right here. We still have to determine cost, and we still need a geotech study to make sure that the ground will support that. So at this point, like I said, we know it's a condition we need to meet. We haven't solved it at this point because it's too early at this point to come up with a concrete answer.
Okay. I guess my questions are leading to, again, long-term costs for that, and some properties have had issues with that failing after a period of time if it's not maintained.
Correct. And I would, while the condition says its intent is to do small size, if it was determined that we were going to do the alley, I would consider that a large size, where it would be publicly maintained. But as we said, we did see another where it was in city property that they did a pervious pavement, and it wasn't pervious concrete; it was actually pervious asphalt, which is a lower maintenance.
Okay.
So but again, we are early on in trying to solve this one.
Yeah. Thank you.
Anybody else? Thanks, Michael.
There was also discussion of both what the requirements are for stormwater discharge to wetland EF23, which is adjacent to the site on the east, what the requirements for stormwater discharge were addressed in the WSDOT TDR and some subsequent studies, and it was all based on maintaining the pre-development hydrology, and it was determined that for this plat that runoff from the rooftops of lots 8 through 21 would be discharged into the wetland, and that would be adequate in terms of the contribution to the wetland hydrology. I think that there's a lot more is going to be worked out with the Bellevue College development in terms of the wetland hydrology, but for the Ichijo plat, it was just lots 8 through 21, which I can. There's a this is sorry. Yep. This shows 5 stormwater lines that would collect runoff from these lots, and it would convey it through the buffer to the wetland, and the storm pipes are intended to go through the buffer and not discharge on the steep slope to avoid erosion there. So, but it's also intended that they be installed with hand tools to excuse me, to minimize the excavation, and then that there be native vegetation placed over the trench so that the pipes aren't visible. But it's really intended to minimize disturbance of vegetation. The pipes are flexible and can go around existing trees.
So, just curious, it's lots 8 through 21. 22 is not factored into that? Curious as to why.
I have to blow it.
Lower left-hand corner.
Which one's 22?
So the one residence
Correct.
remaining?
Yes.
Factored.
Yeah, it's 21, and I'd have to ask the applicant or Dan why it was determined that it was those lots. I suspect that was part of the analysis, that it was only that the hydrology was only necessary from the rooftops of those lots.
Okay. I guess my question is, should it be, considering all other perimeter properties have been factored? So, no answer required now, but open question.
Staff is recommending a minor change to condition 26. The original condition, it's the last sentence of the condition. Let me see if I had it up here. I didn't have the actual condition, the revision to it, but the last sentence of the condition in the staff report addressed that the end of the pipes be stabilized and include energy dissipation measures to minimize erosion and scour. And as you could see in the plat drawing, there's 5 pipes. So modifying the condition to say that the ends of the pipes shall be stabilized and include energy dissipation measures.
Michael?
Yeah, Peter, I have a question about this. Reading through there, it says the water from the roofs will be directly discharged to the wetland because it's determined to be non-polluting or non-pollution generating. And I don't know, and I'm hoping you have some insight into this, with the amount of moss we have on roofs up here and the chemical treatments that are applied to those annually. is that not considered to be a pollution source?
Well, that's a good question because many of the products are considered to be are considered to be pollution sources. I'm not sure if that is something that's generally prohibited in the Highlands, or if that's addressed in
It seems many of our other stormwaters go somewhere and mitigate before they go directly to a wetland or a native natural wetland.
Right.
So just, the Issaquah Highlands prohibits the use of these, and that's consistent, that was carried into this development agreement as well. The use of moss-killing chemicals on roofs for that reason.
Is that enforced? And the second question, are the other areas directly discharging into wetlands like this design proposes?
Mhm.
Okay.
I mean, not all of them, in the same way that not every house in this plat would have its rooftop discharging, but houses that are adjacent to critical areas where it's topographically possible do discharge to maintain hydrology. So there's an education component that the homeowners association does through manuals and other kinds of broadcasts to help homeowners be aware of the limitations on chemicals that can be used, not only for rooftops, but on yards and pesticides, herbicides. It's stricter, and so it's part of the education campaign that they've undertaken. Because everybody reads their plat. Duh.
Nina?
Thank you, Peter.
Okay.
My question regards that in the narrative from our previous meeting on page 22, it said that lots 8 through 21 will be required to discharge into the adjacent wetland. And this one says that they may be discharged. And if it's, so I wondered if, because what we're trying to do is restore or protect the hydrology, that the word may could not, might not be adequate for the intent.
Bill, did you have a? Yes, no? No. Okay.
It's gone now. I was just going to throw a little humor. Probably is, but
Secret to good humor. Timing. Dan?
The development agreement requires that the adjacent rooftops discharge to the, the master drainage plan requires that the adjacent rooftops discharge. I think the condition here was written more to be the method for discharging. So the discharge needs to occur, but it may be in small-scale facilities. The enabling part here was that we could traverse the buffer and get to the wetland with small facilities that were built with hand tools. So the may more references the method to get there than the obligation to make the discharge. Right. And if that's unclear to you, maybe we ought to walk on a revision to that so it's not.
Well, so here's my inclination, and I need to know if you're comfortable with this. In the front of the staff report, it's very clear that no requirement of the development agreement is modified by this unless it is specifically called out. So if that, that's, I think, where we would go if someone came and said, well, it said may, and so we don't think we have to do this. And we would say there's nothing anywhere in the report that says we're not requiring you that all those houses discharge. That's, I think, our fallback if there was an interpretive question.
Just to save people time, if you just move the word may to a later part of the sentence, it might satisfy everything, and then nobody'd come back with that confusion. And there might be just something simple that everybody agrees on. just moving the word may down to the adjacent wetlands, may use small-scale facilities or something like that. That's all I'm thinking.
Did you get that comment, Peter? Okay. Thanks, sir. Any other questions, comments on that? Looks like we're moving on to tract E as in echo.
Oh, actually, that is probably the best. So this was just to clarify that that the plans show a stormwater pipe that would go through tract E, which is the adjacent property to the south, and so this was anticipated in the master drainage plan, and it's an allowed feature. So just wanted to clarify that it was part of the master drainage plan. This isn't a utility that was a result of this specific development. It was anticipated in the master drainage plan.
Lady and gentlemen. Scott, you too. Still about timing. Any questions, comments on that one? I take that as a no. And last, but certainly not least, sustainability. One of you.
I'm not entirely sure what it was we were going to bring. The applicant did bring some material for you to look at as far as who they are, a little bit beyond, because if you recall, for Michael and Scott, since you weren't here last time, I was the only representative for the applicant. They were unable to attend, so I could not expand too much on who Ichijo was and what they could do as far as sustainability and their philosophy of who they are. So at that time, I encouraged everybody, and I'm sure everybody did. They ran right home and looked them up on the website. At least Jim's honest. So with that, like I said, the applicant did bring some material for you to browse through. I wasn't quite sure, Carl, how much you wanted us to say at this point.
Do you guys have any questions or follow on from before about your approach to green building, sustainability, et cetera? Sure.
Well, I guess I did bring some Z-Home brochures for you. So I guess Ichijo, basically give you the 2-minute overview. Ichijo is one of the larger home builders in Japan. They're a family-owned company. They've built nearly 100,000 homes in their history. And I guess for sustainability in the United States, now that we're moving into the United States, one word kind of says it all, and that would be Z-Home. So if you're familiar at all with the Z-Home project, and I did bring some brochures I'll be happy to give to you, was the partnership with the city of Issaquah, Puget Sound Energy, Washington State Energy Institute, King County, built green. It's probably, well, it was recognized as the most ecological, energy efficient, and integrated project in America by the Department of Energy last year. So while that one is not, I don't know how many of you might have had a chance to tour it, we've sold that project out. That's really kind of a demonstration lab, a working laboratory. In fact, one unit is retained as our stewardship center, which demonstrates those components that went into that construction and will be retained for the next 4 or 5 years for the architects and builders and designers that are in the area to come and see what we've done there. This isn't going to be entirely a duplicate. It's not going to be a son of Z-Home. We have what do we have? 200 different geothermal wells on that site. That doesn't lend itself well to individual, single-family homes. But many of the other components in terms of sustainable materials, extensive reuse, we had, to look at my numbers, 86%, I think, recycling. We try to reuse rather than recycle. The Ichijo facility that builds the modular panels for the homes in Japan, for example, they reuse all their scrap lumber to make nosings for the stair risers, butcher block for countertops. There's just very little waste. And we've had inspectors over there that inspect this facility for compliance on a number of different issues in terms of building materials that come to the United States. And everyone, to a man, that's been doing this, we have different guys for windows, different guys for panels, different guys for insulation. Every one of these guys that's come through this facility in the Philippines said, I've done this for 30 years and I've never seen a plant like this. That's this green and this integrated. So Ichijo is green. They've been building green before there was green. They don't waste anything. You know, the little lumber that they can't use goes into the boiler that makes the steam that runs the machine that makes the foam for the insulation. So it's really an integrated deal, and you know, all of those components go into our homes. And I'll give you the Z-Home book, and if you have any other questions, be happy to address those.
Quick question. The types of, and you mentioned how many 100,000 homes they've built,
Yeah.
or Japan or wherever, or they follow what we would consider green construction. I get that the plant is, and I get Z-Home. The building we're looking at now, is this what they're accustomed to, or is Z-Home what they're accustomed to? Where is it on
that was
the
actually
scale?
That was actually Ichijo's first entree to the United States, was hearing about Z-Home, and Howland Homes originally built a number of townhomes in the Seattle area.
Can you get closer to the microphone, Tim? Thank you.
So the Z-Home guys, you know, the partners in the Z-Home project wanted to generate this and have everything different. There we go. They wanted to have everything under the sun incorporated. So no rocket science. All these components and technologies existed before, but this was the first time that they were all integrated in one site at the same time. So we have geothermal wells, you know, low impact materials in all the buildings, no VOC paints, no added formaldehyde, you know, plywood in the cabinets, recycled materials in the countertops, bamboo flooring, the ultimate renewable, can't get rid of it / renewable material. We have some, the window from the back has some pervious pavement to it. We have rain gardens in the front to recycle whatever rainwater comes off. We actually collect and harvest the rainwater from those guys to use for irrigation, and some people get confused, not gray water, but for flushing the toilets and using in the washing machines, we use that water off the roof. So there's lots of opportunities. These are going to be custom homes built, we think, for many, many people that are downsizing, which is why we want to try to leave the lots so that we have an ability to do master on the main, you know, aging in place type facilities. Totally the opposite of the 3-story, you know, Z-Home townhome, which was, you know, in urban village, you know, downtown core project. So a little bit different. And one other thing about garages used to be, you know, there's the old adage about you can't be too rich or too thin. The third one is have too big of a garage. And we've learned that from Z-Home, because green in Seattle does not mean necessarily no cars. It means you have a Subaru and a Prius, or a Prius and a Suburban to go to the mountains, and all the gear that you know comes along with. So that's kind of where we're at in terms of, you know, green and sustainable. But
Good. Thank you.
yeah,
Bill?
If I understand correctly, all these modules are manufactured in Japan.
Philippines.
yeah, we manufacture modules in the Philippines. We have a facility there,
Oh, okay.
and then we also have a facility that we're setting up here in Redmond to manufacture as well.
Oh, you are setting up, okay. You
Yeah.
answered my question.
Yeah, limited on shipping for sizes.
Because I was going to ask if that may eventually come to the United States. I'm assuming that this is sort of the trial, the footprint for them to find out whether this can be successful enough to expand this
Exactly.
further into the country.
Yeah,
And therefore, they would have a plant or maybe plants here in the United States.
exactly. And so we're doing kind of a mini version of that in Redmond, and we're doing a model home right now up in Issaquah Highlands, which you'll all be invited to come see probably in June.
Super.
Which has some local panels and some factory panels.
That's my question. I think you lead to that. What design lines would be overseeing solar panels, wind turbines, those sorts of things? And this is maybe a city question for
Can you
this.
say it again? I couldn't quite hear you.
Yeah, what what design lines would be influencing the placement or usage of wind turbines, solar panels, those alternate energy sources in a property like this as opposed to something more defined like Z homes? Can a property here have a massive solar panel on its roof, for example?
From the city's perspective, I would think it would be a load and, it would be a technical exercise. The ARC may have some things to say about it, but the way, and with wind turbines, the way the evolution has gone so that there are ones with no visible moving parts, I think that someone could have them in a relatively dense area now that some of the safety issues have been addressed.
Big issue for ARC is glare.
Yeah,
So we're
glare.
always aware of that.
Exactly, from the valley floor glare, and then, with our setting sun, and then,
Unfortunately, in
views
this
as time goes on.
topography, because we've got this beautiful forest around the south and the east side, a lot of the homes probably aren't going to lend themselves to solar panels. So some will, some won't, I would imagine.
So ultimately, there's really nothing preventing a homeowner from putting something up? Okay.
I mean, I don't know the building code, but I can't imagine, we've just adopted, I think we're one of the few that have just adopted several sustainability measures for residential construction to take it even further than the state has, so.
Do we have any not legislation, but any code, especially in the Highlands, protecting people's, and it might not apply here, but people's views? Building height in a lot, for example?
So the city is not particularly supportive of that. The property owners sometimes do that because they are interested in, that's part of what people's expectations are. And we worry about, the size trees and things that you get and some of how you can replant hillsides, but it's generally a private property matter.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Jim?
Tim, just real quickly, do you have any cost basis that you can share with us? Usually green building is almost prohibitively expensive, and that's one of the big drawbacks with it. I'm fascinated to see if the costs are coming down yet. Can you compare costs with traditional home building, for instance?
We get to ask that question a lot. I can't really give you a definitive answer because it's kind of like the $600 ashtray. Remember that deal with the Air Force? If you want to build one little tiny house, it's still going to have a kitchen and it's still going to have bathrooms and so on. So your cost per square foot is much higher. If you build a really large house, the cost can be negligible. So in between, there's a wide range. Solar has come way, way down, just the actual solar panels. And I would guess, 7 or 8 years from now, we'll all go to Costco and we'll buy 2 or 3 4x8 panels. And that'll get us the yield of what we have now because the efficiency of each square foot or square meter of panel is continuing to go up. When we started with Z-Home, it was like 135 or 165 watts, I think. And what we ended up putting on there a year and a half, 2 years later was 235 watts from that same panel. So it wasn't quite doubling, but in the meantime, that cost has come down by half for what we paid. So, there's our goal as Ichijo, a few years down the road, we can look back and say, it used to be a premium. But we want all our houses to be able to be energy efficient so that we don't need a whole lot of solar panels. We don't need a giant furnace. We don't need a lot of the things that take energy or have to produce energy in the first place. That's really our goal. And so we have enough money in savings because we include all those components in the home in the first place that we can pay for whatever latest and greatest technologies need to be added on, like solar panels. It used to be you had to buy extra. You'd pay extra for a radio in your car, right? Now you get an MP3 player and, it's all standard. Eventually all homes will be this way.
Thank you.
Great, thank you for that,
Yeah.
Tim. So, closing out here, process-wise, we're going to entertain some public comments specifically on this plat, and then if the applicant or staff needs to respond to that, then they'll have an opportunity to do that, and then we'll have discussion and make a decision recommendation. So with that, I'd like to open it up to public comment. Mr. Kepler?
Thank you. David Kapler, 255 Southeast Andrews Street. Okay. You just said I was going to restrict my comments to the plat. Well, I'm not. No. There's a bigger issue here, and that is you're the Urban Village Development Commission. Let's look at the land, not just in Parcel 2, but let's look beyond that, how it interfaces with Parcel 2, and for the future, how you want that 43 acres of land that the city now owns is going to be transferred to the county, how you want to see that used, and how you want to integrate that in with the rest of the Highlands. So I think just thinking about that is something you want to be doing, because I think that property is has some real benefits to this Parcel 2 property, especially for Tract A. It appears that nobody here, except maybe staff, has actually been up on the property. I've been up in that property for years because it was all part of the WSDOT acquisition, and we're trying to figure out what would be the development part and what would be the part that would go into permanent open space. And we worked through the mitigated determination of non-significance. Spent a lot of time working with staff on that, and also on the conservation easement that's on those 43 acres. So, and that 43 acres is real important to how it ties in with Bellevue College site, which we'll be dealing with in the near future. And the little map that I put on my letter of today does show the wetland 23, but wetland 23 actually extends to the further north all the way up, and actually is right next to and was partially taken by College Drive. There's also in the middle of the college parcel, the big white chunk there, is another creek that comes down, Wetland Creek 21. And there's a nice area between those two that could be great for the future for an interpretive trail and an area for the college to do some study. They're already talking about potential studies of wetlands and creeks and monitoring the impacts over the urban development over time on those two areas. Oh, that'd be good. Okay, yeah. Thank you. There's a wetland right here and a creek that comes down. This is the area that the county has been, the city's been trying to get the county to take for a couple of years now, but because of the issues with the paved trail. The paved trail issues has delayed that that acquisition. So we're talking about below that line that goes across the bottom is the WSDOT retained property with the...
So you can point right on the document camera if you want to.
Yes, thank you. So right here, this is the border between the WSDOT property, which goes down to the to I-90, and the property that used to belong to WSDOT that the city now owns. So they got this big W-type shape thing, the 43 acres. And I don't believe that the Issaquah Highlands community has any responsibility for maintenance and operation of that 43 acres. The part that they might have an interest in is just to the right of the word Issaquah in there, there's a little piece that the city is retaining. It's in the city already of a parcel there. So I think in this plat, potentially tomorrow, the land surrounding it could be in the county. So that has to be reflected in the conditions that how this is worked out. The applicant might be dealing with those trees that are in the county and dealing with King County, not with the city. Now the city, when they transfer it to King County, can make assurances in that agreement that the applicant can deal with the trees and that kind of thing. So I think it can be worked out. But it is important to realize that King County Sheriff is responsible for that property. It's not urban, it's rural, and it's in the sheriff's domain, not the city's, although because the city owns it now, they obviously have an interest in it. But when it goes to the county, all around it will be the sheriff's responsibility unless the city and the sheriff come to some kind of agreement on that. Okay. The Tract A, the property where all the houses are proposed is a beautiful old second growth forest, big trees, great, lots of ferns and everything. And you get over closer to there on the where Tract A is, that's the area that Puget Sound Energy had over time just kind of bulldozed it all over, because they got two transmission line corridors through there, two transmission sections of lines. And then west of that is the gas line, which is actually mowed. But Puget, where Puget was, it's got a lot of blackberries, small alders, and it's really not very nice at all. It could make, I think it would be great if there's an agreement, and it's kind of beyond what you guys can do in some ways, but at least the city council still owns that land, and this is going to go on to the council for further, but I would recommend some kind of recommendation that really urge the council to get serious about talking with Parcel 2 owners about how they can enhance and expand their Parcel A use there and really make that a much nicer area. I mean, they can do all wonderful things and have all those nice native plants on their strip of property, but if right next to it is blackberries that are, and blackberries and other non-native things, it's just not going to be good. And those houses that face to the west, it'd be really nice if they had not only saw that 30-some foot strip, but beyond that, and it was nice native plantings and all. And I think that can work out, and it'd be a win for everybody. Besides, then Connie and I wouldn't be in charge of the blackberries and the butterfly bush. Okay. One concern is on the south boundary. And you saw it on some of the contour lines here. There's some slope there, then we'd want to make sure that the trees are protected over time, because they're going to be filling. Now, the trees that are on the city or eventually county property would be one, but if they're filled down and over on top of the roots to some degree, that could be a problem for those trees over time. So I'm just concerned about that. The MDNS conditions, there were 50 of them or something. They were referred to in the first report, but I really think they should be included in the plat, and I thought they were on some of the other, on plat for Polygon. I thought we got that to be included in there, because those conditions all do apply to this plat. Right now is the Homeowner Association, the greater Issaquah Highlands one, does not have responsibility for that open space on the west side of Parcel 2. To me, it should be at least the Tract A. There should be a homeowners association associated with Parcel 2 that would have hopefully some agreement with the city and eventually the county on part of that extension of that Parcel A. I'm not talking about them taking over that whole area of the corridor, but at least some of that area that adjoins Tract A. There was the parking issue on the very southwest end, and I'm sure kind of curious how those poor cars that park at the very end of the Wunderf are going to turn around. And the last house in the very southwest corner there was actually closer to the road than the next house in. I don't know if those houses can be pushed a little bit more or something, get a little width there so cars could turn around without a little more easily. Pervious pavement is a neat concept. We did it on Rainier, between the bridge and to the railroad tracks, basically that section in there. Cost us a lot. It's worked fine, but it drove me nuts that they had to put in like 18 inches of gravel underneath the pavement to make it work, so the water had a place to go. So I was really questioning what kind of environmental benefit if you're having to use that much gravel to put under a road surface. So you have water storage between the spaces and the gravel. So I'm not sure that's the right way to go. Nobody will see these homes from any other plat or whatever. And it's a flat area there, so in terms of solar, some of the homes will be in the shade of those trees, but a lot of potential for solar on the roofs. That won't be a glare problem around, and hardly see those. The houses are going to be so close together if the peaks are running east-west, especially towards Parcel A, and that I think you could have a lot of potential solar use there, except when you're closest to the forest. And I don't think it'd be a visual problem. Okay, but think about what you want to tell the city council about how they're going to manage this 43 acres specifically to the west of Parcel 2. Thank you. I've waited more of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Kapler. I think first staff and then the applicant has an opportunity to respond if necessary.
Is there anything the commission specifically wanted staff to respond to in terms of those comments?
I'm seeing no's and blank faces, so I don't think so. I'm seeing no's and or blank faces. I have to use precise language with Mr. Horton in the room. So I guess the answer is no, Peter. Thank you. Glenn, nothing? Okay. With that, let's open it up with discussion. Our next step would be to have a motion if we so decide, recommendation. Any comments from Mr. Kapler's comments or anything we've heard tonight?
Before we have our discussion, could Lucy remind us this is a recommendation of the City Council rather than an approval? Is that right? Or the other way?
This is actually a recommendation to the city hearing examiner under this development agreement. This plat will go to a closed record hearing to the hearing examiner.
Comments? Yes. Scott. Fine.
There we go. All right. Thank you. I would like to say thank you to Mr. Kapler for your comments and detailed information. Very much appreciated. As far as closing comments and thoughts, I would like to give some additional attention, if feasible, around the location 22, I think it was, the turnaround space down there. I do have some concerns, reservations, specifically, as you've heard consistently from the group, the commission, around available space and the impact associated for that resident owner for turnarounds. And secondly, in regards to greenery, vegetation, if you will, the opportunity to take into consideration additional trees planted along the roadway, if, again, that is feasible from an aesthetic perspective and an environmental perspective. Thank you.
Comment to me.
Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, I also appreciate Mr. Kapler's comments always. And my concern was that I think we made the efforts to address the concerns that you mentioned with parts the track A and that land adjacent west of it. And I was even trying to enhance that language, but I think it was clear that there were some limitations to what we can do. So I think we certainly expressed our interest that there's a great opportunity, and I think it'll be beneficial to the developer for those homeowners to have an enhanced view by getting rid of the bushes and helping it out. So I think we've been making that effort to address that. So I just want to add that.
Thank you, Eric. And one thing before we work our way down the line, just to get comments from everybody, is if we need to make any adjustments to the language, if indeed we do want to move forward with the recommendation. Bill?
I also have a concern about the lack of a turnaround down there by lot 2022. I really think that needs to be addressed. The other thing, I also agree, I'm a little concerned about the lack of more information with regard to landscaping. If I remember correctly, on most all the other projects that we've been involved with, we've had some pretty extensive information with regard to landscaping. So we're kind of going blind in that area in terms of what may or may not happen.
So you may be, there are two different kinds of permits that come to the commission. One are plats, which
Right.
is for the subdivision of the land, and the other is site development permits. And I think you may be thinking of site development permits because they usually have extensive landscape information, you know, example areas, general tree and shrubbery layout. So that may be what you're thinking of, because we don't usually get that much information with a plat.
And I think also.
Well, I thought we were going beyond plat in this particular case because this isn't just the developer of the plat, but he's also, if I understand correctly, the developer in building the houses on there.
He will, but that would happen later, either in conjunction with an open space design that staff would review administratively, or with the architectural review committee. So it's not something that, it's not, it is associated with plat as we move it down the line, but the actual platting isn't based on the landscape design.
I think also because within the last 18 months or so, we've looked at a couple of development agreements
Yes,
that
that's
have
an
had
excellent
heavy
point.
information on there, and they lead us to
Okay.
believe we're seeing more. So fair comment. Jim? Got nothing. Mr. Beard?
I just want to state that I find it curious that we have designated a wetland and protected it with a 100-foot buffer, but we don't have any qualms about directly discharging a fairly significant portion of water from roofs into that. And I know that's probably beyond this, but to me that just seems a little bit of a weakness to this plan. So.
Because you're assuming that, what are you thinking?
There's really nothing protecting that water other than education. I mean, we're physically designing that water to directly discharge there and then hoping that education will protect it. And I know the county has put a considerable amount of resources into protecting that wetland half a mile south of that site and improving that river along the I-90 corridor there. And this seems to me they're pretty connected.
Right, but that assumes that people are going to use those chemicals, which is not necessary. I see a lurking figure.
I'm Lurk.
You're right.
There are literally hundreds of rooftops in Issaquah Highlands that discharge to wetlands. It was the cornerstone of the stormwater plan in the original development agreement. And those wetlands have been monitored for the last 15 years, and there isn't any reason to believe that the public education program and the enforcement program that's in place up there to protect the stormwater quality coming off the roofs isn't working.
So the data supports that it has had minimal impact in the wetlands up there?
Yes.
Okay, that's sufficient for any concerns I have. Thank you.
That's excellent feedback, thank you.
And interestingly enough, I know when we've had people come in and work on our roof, most of those guys are aware of what they cannot, should not do up there. So they're actually educated as well, because I can't climb on our roof and do anything. So, Scott, we're good, Nina? Pretty much, yeah. I don't have anything new other than I agree, especially the lot 22 and the turnaround, making access for city vehicles to get in there, I think, is part and parcel of that, no pun intended. I'm looking for the entertainment of watching people trying to parallel park in that last spot anyway. It should be a nice 15-point turn to get in and out of there. So,
The standards in the original Issaquah Highlands development agreement included a variety of turnaround shapes that were allowed to be used on the ends of roadways like this. One of those is a T, so that you pull straight in, you back around the leg of the T and then back out again. The geometry of that T is actually very close to the configuration here with the alley. So you would pull into the head of the Wooner if you would back out into the alley and then turn around that way. It's only an extra 30 or 40 feet. I mean, if you were to shave off 30 or 40 feet, you would have the same geometry that is in a street standard. So it's not inconceivable to think that that's a maneuver that may be relatively convenient to make for passenger cars.
I actually see people drive those, so.
Touche.
Okay, Lucy, do you have a markup for us? Are we ready to move to a movement?
So what I was thinking I would do is put this.
Don't say it.
I'm ignoring that. I was going to put this up on the document camera so you could see the edits that I made to those 3 conditions, and you could talk about whether they were sufficient.
So do you want to read the edits to us, or just have us read it, or?
I'd read it if anyone needs a bedtime story.
Well, someone's got to make the motion, so can we, is it legible?
At least you're consistent and contiguous.
Okay, who would like to read?
And you'll need the bottom part of this one.
That's what you get for sitting there.
So when does this one come into play, Lucy?
After you get through the handwritten part.
Do this and then there?
Yes, please.
I move that the Urban Village Development Commission recommends approval to the city's hearing examiner of the Ichijo preliminary plat, file number PP12-0002, as described and evaluated in the staff report dated March 12, 2013, plat drawings dated January 24, 2013, staff memo dated March 26, 2013, and subject to the conditions as identified in the staff report, with revised conditions number 8, 36, 29, and 26, and the new conditions number 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, and 46 in the staff memo, and with the addition, revision, and following conditions. Edit condition number 41 to read, in part, it must be less than 48 inches in height and maintained at or below that height, and continuing on. Number 43, edit the condition to read, in part, provide a relatively flat, contiguous area of a minimum 2,000 square feet, and then so forth. Number 26, edit the condition to read, in part, lots 8 through 21 will discharge directly into the adjacent wetland and may use small-scale facilities. And I move that the Urban Village Development Commission direct the Development Service Department to prepare findings of fact and conclusions for review and approval by the UVDC chairman, affirming that the UVDC's decision to approve the Ichijo preliminary plat, file number PP12-0002, subject to the conditions listed in the staff report and as modified in the staff memo of March 26, 2013, and as amended or revised this evening.
I don't know whether we need clarification or not, but file number PP12- is 00002.
Second that.
So moved, seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Decision to recommend to the hearing examiner is carried unanimously. And I guess the last thing we would have, thank you all, and thank you staff, applicant, and David. Any other public comment You did it, okay. Any other issues for us to discuss before we adjourn? Next meeting, anything else?
So we are working on the site development permit for the lakeside eastern property, but we're not sure when it's going to come to you. There's still some pieces to be worked out with the applicant. As we've said, there are a lot of permits, but we're not certain of a lot of the dates. So as soon as we get a definitive schedule, we'll let you know. I would hope the lakeside might be by early to mid-May, but we just don't know for sure.
Okay.
You know, I meant to email them today. They had said mid to late May was their submittal, and I would assume it'd be a month to 6 weeks before we got that to you after it was submitted. But I don't know. They want to do it this year, but they're not they're not on a tight construction schedule. So I'm not sure that it might not slip by a month.
Super, thank you. Peter, anything from you? Okay. Oh, Michael?
I was curious if that Bellevue College was going to be, I think you just alluded to that. Is that something they're going to try and conclude by the end of this year?
Oh, yeah, they want it this summer.
Okay.
And since you and Scott weren't here, I mean, we've got Lakeside's STP, we've got blocks 21 and 22, which are between Devco and Regency. We're likely to have an STP for the blocks north of Proliance, which is that medical office building next to Swedish, all the way from there to Discovery. Devco's signed a purchase and sale agreement, so they're in feasibility. Providence is interested in the area north of Swedish. They are not going to be doing an STP, but we may be doing some kind of agreement with them to give them confidence to move forward. Costco may be interested in doing something related to CIP and some more detailed things for their property. You guys, we think you're going to be really busy, but we just don't know exactly when.
Yeah.
In November, December.
Yeah.
Have there been
Happy holidays.
decisions?
My understanding is it's all delayed till next year.
Okay, with that, we are adjourned at 9, looks like 17. Thank you all very much.
You know,